We all grew up tracking Santa on Christmas Eve. It's a tradition. But did you know there is a second server? A hidden IP address that the public isn't supposed to see? I found it last night. And whatever it's tracking, it isn't delivering presents. It's hunting. I need to explain how this started because if something happens to me, someone needs to understand. My name doesn't matter. What matters is that I work in cybersecurity and I have a habit of poking around places I shouldn't. It's not malicious. It never was. I just like understanding how systems work, pulling back the curtain on the code that runs our digital world. Last Christmas Eve, that curiosity led me somewhere I can never return from. It started on a forum I frequent. Not the surface-level Reddit threads or the sanitized discussions you find on mainstream platforms. This was deeper, a community of developers and security researchers who trade information about legacy systems, forgotten servers, and abandoned code. Someone posted a thread about the NORAD Santa tracker, the beloved tradition where families watch a little sleigh icon circle the globe on Christmas Eve. The poster was asking if anyone had ever accessed the original source code, the framework that powers the whole display. Most people assumed it was just a simple JavaScript animation layered over Google Maps. But one commenter posted something different. They said the public tracker is just a skin, a friendly interface designed for children and families. Beneath it, there's an actual tracking system. Military grade. Something NORAD uses for purposes they've never disclosed to the public. And then they posted a link. It was an onion address, the kind you can only access through Tor. The URL was simple but ominous. NORAD milspec 892.onion. I should have scrolled past it. I should have closed the browser and gone to bed like a normal person on Christmas Eve. But the comments beneath the link were strange. 3 people claimed they had accessed it successfully, describing a darker interface with more detailed telemetry. 2 others said the link was dead. And one person simply wrote, "Don't stay on it too long. It tracks back." That comment had been posted 6 months ago. The user hadn't been active since. Against every instinct I had developed in my years of working in this field, I copied the link. I opened Tor, configured my VPN through 3 different countries, and pasted the address into the browser. The loading screen took longer than usual. Tor is always slow, but this was different. It felt like the server was deciding whether to let me in. When the page finally loaded, my breath caught in my throat. It looked almost identical to the public NORAD tracker, but the color scheme was wrong. Instead of the cheerful red and green interface with falling snowflakes, this version was dark. Military gray and black, with thin white grid lines overlaying a globe that rotated slowly in the center of the screen. In the corner, there was a timestamp synced to coordinated universal time and a small text indicator that read Dev Mode, Internal Access Only. I knew immediately that I was looking at something I wasn't supposed to see. The logical part of my brain screamed at me to close the tab, to disconnect from the VPN, to pretend I had never found this. But the curious part, the part that had gotten me into trouble my entire life, kept me rooted to my chair. I scrolled down, looking for any information about how this version differed from the public tracker. That's when I noticed the map wasn't just showing one icon. On the public version, you see Santa's sleigh moving across continents, leaving a glittering trail as it delivers presents to children around the world. This version had that same sleigh icon, currently positioned over Eastern Europe according to the timestamp. But behind it, maybe 500 miles back, there was something else. A second dot. It was gray. Not the festive red of the sleigh, not marked with any cheerful holiday imagery. Just a small, pulsing gray circle that seemed to flicker slightly, like the signal tracking it wasn't entirely stable. When I hovered my cursor over it, a text box appeared. The label simply read, Case Subject Status, Active. I stared at that label for what felt like an eternity. Case Subject. Not a name, not an identifier that made any logical sense. Just a designation, clinical and cold. I looked at the sleigh icon and then back at the gray dot. They were moving in the same direction, but the gray dot was faster. Much faster. In the corner of the screen, there were speed indicators for both objects. The sleigh was traveling at approximately Mach 2, which aligned with the playful explanations NORAD gives children about how Santa delivers presents so quickly. But the gray dot was different. According to the telemetry, it was moving at Mach 10. Whatever this thing was, it was gaining on the sleigh. And as I watched, frozen in my chair with the glow of the monitor illuminating my face in that dark room, I realized something that made my blood run cold. This wasn't just a tracking system. This was a pursuit. I sat in the darkness of my apartment, watching the gray dot crawl across Eastern Europe. The sleigh icon had already crossed into Russia, but the gray dot seemed unhurried, following the same general path but deviating in ways that didn't make sense if it was simply chasing the sleigh. I zoomed in on the map, using the scroll function to get a closer look at its trajectory, and that's when the first pattern emerged. The sleigh stopped constantly. Every few seconds, the icon would pause briefly over a city, a town, a village. These were the simulated delivery stops, the moments when children around the world believed Santa was visiting their homes. But the gray dot didn't stop at the same places. It bypassed the major population centers entirely. When the sleigh paused over Warsaw, the gray dot continued south, avoiding the city by at least 50 kilometers. When the sleigh moved toward Moscow, the gray dot veered east toward a cluster of small rural communities. I pulled up a secondary monitor and started taking notes. For the next 2 hours, I documented every stop the gray dot made. The pattern was undeniable. It only stopped in isolated locations: farms, remote villages, houses positioned miles from their nearest neighbors. The kind of places where no one would see it arrive, and no one would hear anything unusual. Each stop lasted exactly 30 seconds. I timed them repeatedly, thinking there must be some variation, some deviation that would help me understand what was happening. But the precision was mechanical. 29.5 seconds of stillness, then movement resumed at that terrifying Mach 10 velocity. Whatever K-subject was doing at those locations, it was efficient. It didn't linger. I tried to rationalize what I was seeing. Maybe this was some kind of military drone, a surveillance system piggybacking on the Christmas tradition for cover. Maybe the isolated stops were data collection points, sensors or installations that needed regular calibration. My mind created a dozen explanations, each more desperate than the last, because the alternative was something I couldn't bring myself to accept. Around 2 in the morning, the gray dot made a stop that changed everything. It paused over a small community in rural Ukraine, a village so tiny that the map barely registered it as a populated area. I marked the coordinates and the exact timestamp, then minimized the tracker and opened a new browser window. I needed more information. I've spent years cultivating access to systems that most people don't know exist. Police scanners, emergency dispatch networks, municipal databases with backdoors that have existed since the 90s. It took me less than 10 minutes to find a regional feed covering the area where the gray dot had stopped. The audio was crackling with static, the connection unstable through my layered encryption, but I could make out enough to understand. There was chaos on that frequency. Officers shouting coordinates. Emergency services being dispatched to an address I didn't recognize. And then, cutting through the static, a voice that I'll hear in my nightmares for the rest of my life. The dispatcher was asking for clarification, trying to understand what the responding officer was describing. The officer's voice was shaking so badly that his words came out in fragments. The roof? There's no roof. The whole structure is... I don't know what could do this. The family, they were here. They were here an hour ago. The neighbors spoke to them. I stopped breathing. I rewound the audio and played it again, writing down every word I could decipher. The officer was describing a scene of impossible destruction. Not a fire. Not an explosion. Something had removed the roof of this family's home, and the family along with it. The walls were standing. The furniture was in place. But the roof was gone, and so were the people who had been sleeping beneath it. I looked back at the tracker. The gray dot had already moved on, cutting across the border into Poland. In the 30 seconds it had spent at that location, something catastrophic had occurred. And according to the map, it had made 7 more stops since then. The coffee I had been drinking sat forgotten on my desk, cold and bitter. My hands were trembling as I pulled up additional scanner frequencies, searching for coverage along the gray dot's path. Each stop corresponded to another emergency call. Different languages, different jurisdictions, but the same horror repeated again and again. In one village, a first responder described walls covered in a substance that wasn't blood but wasn't anything else they recognized either. In another, a family of 5 had simply vanished, leaving behind a meal still warm on the table and doors that remained locked from the inside. And always, the reports mentioned the roof. Something about the structure being opened from above, as if the ceiling had been peeled back like the lid of a container. I cross-referenced the coordinates with the tracker's log, confirming times and locations. The correlation was perfect. Every stop the gray dot made resulted in an emergency call within minutes. The 30-second duration wasn't data collection or surveillance. It was extraction. And as I scrolled through the log, I noticed something else that made the horror complete. The sleigh icon was moving in a predictable pattern, the same route NORAD shows the public every year. But the gray dot wasn't just following. It was going to the places the sleigh had skipped. The isolated locations where the festive tracker never paused. The houses that Santa, by whatever criteria the simulation used, had decided not to visit. I spent the next hour building a database. Every stop the gray dot made, every emergency call I could trace, every scrap of information that confirmed what I was watching wasn't some elaborate hoax. By 4 in the morning, the pattern was so clear that denial was no longer possible. The gray dot was visiting houses on the naughty list, and it wasn't delivering coal. The thought seemed absurd when I first allowed myself to think it. The naughty list is a childhood myth, a way for parents to encourage good behavior in the weeks leading up to Christmas. But the tracking system I was watching wasn't designed for children. This was military infrastructure, hidden behind layers of encryption and accessible only through channels that the general public would never find. Whatever criteria determined which houses the gray dot visited, it was systematic and absolute. I started looking for patterns in the victims. This was harder, requiring me to dig through local news feeds and municipal records that took time to translate. But slowly, a picture emerged that made me wish I had never started looking. The families weren't random. They weren't selected by geography or economic status or any demographic I could identify. They were selected by something else, something I couldn't quantify but recognized instinctively. One family in Romania had been under investigation for child neglect. The charges were dropped due to insufficient evidence, but the gray dot had found them anyway. Another household in rural Poland had a patriarch who had served time for assault, released early on good behavior. The gray dot visited them while they slept. A couple in Hungary had been reported by neighbors for suspicious activity involving packages delivered late at night. The investigation went nowhere. The gray dot went somewhere. The naughty list wasn't about whether you ate your vegetables or did your homework. It was about something deeper, something that left a stain the system could detect. And the gray dot, this case subject that moved faster than any aircraft in any military's known arsenal, was the enforcement mechanism. I pulled up the police scanner for Chicago. The gray dot had crossed the Atlantic by this point, moving across the eastern United States with the same methodical precision I had observed in Europe. According to the tracker, it had stopped at a location on the city's south side at exactly 11:42 in the evening. I found the emergency frequency and scrubbed back to that timestamp. The dispatch audio was clearer than the European feeds, the English making every horrifying detail immediately comprehensible. A neighbor had called 911 after hearing a sound they described as metal scraping against metal, loud enough to wake them despite the distance between properties. When police arrived, they found a scene that defied explanation. The responding officer's voice was flat, the way voices become when the mind refuses to process what the eyes are seeing. "Dispatch, we have. I don't know what this is. The chimney is gone. The entire chimney from the roof down to the foundation. And the family." A long pause filled with static. "There's no family. There's nothing. It's like they were never here." I listened to that audio 3 times. Then I pulled up the log and counted the stops the gray dot had made since crossing into American airspace. 37. 37 households visited in less than 4 hours, each stop lasting exactly 30 seconds. 37 emergency calls, 37 families, and by morning, 37 inexplicable cases that would be quietly filed away and forgotten. The scale of what I was witnessing crushed something inside me. This had been happening every Christmas Eve for how long I couldn't guess. Decades? Centuries? The tracking system had a modern interface, but the core protocol beneath it could have been running since computers were first capable of maintaining such records. Every year, while children tracked Santa's journey and fell asleep dreaming of presents, something else moved through the night, cleaning up the list that never made it to the public version. I tried to disconnect. I tried to close the browser and pretend I had never seen any of this, but the cursor wouldn't respond. The window refused to minimize, refused to close, refused to do anything except display that rotating globe with its two moving dots. I reached for the power button on my laptop, thinking I would simply force a shutdown and deal with the consequences later. That's when the gray dot stopped. I watched, paralyzed, as the icon froze over a location in western Pennsylvania. It had been moving so consistently, so predictably, that the sudden stillness was jarring. For a moment, I thought the connection had dropped, that the server had finally noticed the unauthorized access and cut me off. Then the dot pulsed. It changed from gray to a deep, angry red. The pulsing was rhythmic, like a heartbeat, like something alive and aware. And at the bottom of the screen, a text box appeared that hadn't been there before. The message was simple, clinical, and devastating. Unauthorized viewer detected. Tracing initiated. I screamed. I screamed and grabbed my laptop and tried to slam it shut, but the hinges wouldn't move. The screen flickered, the map reconfiguring itself, zooming out from Pennsylvania and recentering on a new location. My location. My apartment, my building, the exact coordinates where I sat frozen in terror. A new timer appeared in the corner of the screen, counting down from 4 minutes. And beneath it, in letters that seemed to glow with their own terrible light, a single line of text. Estimated arrival. 3 minutes and 47 seconds. That's what the timer displayed when I finally stopped screaming long enough to think. My laptop sat on the desk in front of me, no longer responding to any input, its screen locked on that terrible map with my location pinned at the center. The gray dot wasn't gray anymore. It pulsed red over Pennsylvania, frozen in place as if waiting for something, and I knew with absolute certainty what it was waiting for. The countdown had begun. I tried everything. I yanked the power cable from the wall, but the battery kept the laptop running. I attempted to hold the power button, but the system ignored the command. I considered throwing the machine out the window, smashing it against the wall, doing anything to sever whatever connection had been established. But some rational part of my mind whispered that it wouldn't matter. The trace was complete. Whatever protocol I had triggered, it already knew where I was. 3 minutes and 22 seconds. I grabbed my phone and started recording. Something happened to me. I needed evidence. Someone needed to understand what I had found, what existed in the shadows of that cheerful Christmas tradition. My hands shook so badly that the footage was going to be nearly unwatchable, but I documented everything. The screen, the timer, the red dot that hadn't moved since the detection warning appeared. My apartment building was old, a converted warehouse that had been turned into loft-style units 20 years ago. I was on the 4th floor, the top level, with nothing above me except a flat industrial roof. The irony wasn't lost on me. Every victim I had tracked, every emergency call I had listened to, the reports all mentioned the roof. They came from above. Whatever this thing was, it descended vertically. 2 minutes and 58 seconds. I ran to the window and looked out at the street below. The city was quiet at this hour, a few scattered lights in distant buildings, the occasional car passing through the intersection at the end of my block. Everything looked normal. No emergency vehicles, no indication that anything unusual was approaching. But I knew the gray dot moved at Mach 10. At that speed, the distance from Pennsylvania to my apartment would take less than 3 minutes to cross. It was already on its way. I considered running. I could grab my keys, take the elevator down, disappear into the streets before whatever was coming reached my building. But the victims hadn't run. They had been in their homes, going about their lives, completely unaware that they had been targeted. And yet they still vanished. The doors remained locked, the windows intact, the meals still warm on their tables. Running might not matter. 2 minutes and 12 seconds. My phone rang. The sound was so jarring, so out of place that I nearly dropped both devices. The screen displayed an unknown number, a string of digits that didn't conform to any format I recognized. I answered it anyway, pressing the phone to my ear with a hand that wouldn't stop trembling. Static. Deep, layered static that sounded like wind rushing through a tunnel. And beneath it, something else. A rhythmic sound, mechanical and organic at the same time, like breathing filtered through a broken speaker. Then a voice, though calling it a voice felt wrong. It was too flat, too constructed. Words assembled from samples rather than spoken by anything with a throat. You have accessed restricted observation protocols. A pause filled with that horrible breathing sound. Your presence has been logged. I tried to speak, tried to demand answers, but my voice came out as a strangled whisper. The thing on the other end continued as if it hadn't expected a response. Compliance is calculated based on cumulative behavioral indices. Your index is currently under review. Another pause. Remain where you are. Resistance will affect your classification. The call ended. No click, no dial tone, just silence so complete that I thought I had gone deaf. I pulled the phone away from my ear and stared at it, my reflection distorted in the dark screen. The timer on my laptop caught my eye. 1 minute and 34 seconds. I made a decision that felt insane but also felt like the only option left. I grabbed my laptop and ran to the bathroom, the only room in my apartment without windows. I climbed into the bathtub, pulled the shower curtain closed, and positioned the screen so I could still see the countdown. The red dot was moving now. It had left Pennsylvania and was cutting across the map with impossible speed, a crimson streak heading directly toward the blinking marker that represented my building. 57 seconds. The laptop speaker crackled. The map interface was changing, the zoom level adjusting as the red dot approached. I could see the individual blocks of my neighborhood now, the streets I walked every day, the buildings I passed without thinking. And at the center, my apartment complex, rendered in that military gray with a pulsing target lock. 31 seconds. I heard something outside the bathroom. A sound that didn't belong in my apartment, a vibration that seemed to come from everywhere at once. It was deep, subsonic, a frequency that I felt in my bones more than heard with my ears. The lights in my apartment flickered. 19 seconds. The vibration intensified. I pressed my hands over my ears, but it made no difference. The sound was inside me, resonating through my skull, making my teeth ache and my vision blur. Through the closed bathroom door, I saw the lights in the living room go out completely, plunging my apartment into darkness except for the glow of the laptop screen. 7 seconds. Everything stopped. The vibration, the countdown, even the hum of the building's electrical system. Complete and total silence fell over my apartment like a blanket. I sat in the bathtub, holding my phone and my laptop, surrounded by darkness and quiet. Then I heard it. From somewhere above me on the roof of my building, the unmistakable sound of sleigh bells. But they didn't sound festive. They sounded heavy, rusted, metallic. They sounded like chains being dragged across concrete. And then a thud. Something had landed on the roof. The thud was followed by silence. Not the ordinary silence of a quiet night, but something deeper, a vacuum where sound should have existed but didn't. I held my breath in that bathtub, clutching my phone with fingers that had gone completely numb, and listened for anything that would tell me what was happening above me. The laptop screen flickered. The map was gone, replaced by a black background with white text that appeared one letter at a time, as if something was typing a message directly to me. The letters materialized slowly, each one accompanied by a soft clicking sound that came through the speakers. Oh, a space. Oh, another space. Oh. The complete message sat on the screen, glowing in that pitch-dark bathroom. Oh, oh, oh. Not the jolly exclamation of holiday cheer, but a statement of presence. A declaration that something was here, and it knew exactly where to find me. I heard movement on the roof. Not footsteps, not any sound I could identify as walking. It was more like something dragging itself across the industrial surface, heavy and deliberate. The sound moved from the center of the building toward the edge, toward the section directly above my apartment. And then it stopped. My phone buzzed. A text message from that same impossible number, the string of digits that didn't conform to any format. I opened it with trembling hands and the message made my heart stop. 4th floor, Unit 4C, Behavioral Index, pending review. That was my unit. Whatever was on the roof knew exactly where I lived and it was coming down. I heard the first sound of impact against the roof directly above my living room. It wasn't a crash or an explosion. It was a grinding noise like machinery chewing through concrete and steel. I imagined the roof being peeled back exactly as those police reports had described, opened from above like someone lifting the lid of a box. The grinding stopped. Through the bathroom door, I could see faint light spilling in from the living room, but it wasn't electrical light. It was something else, a pale luminescence that had no visible source. And with that light came cold. Not winter cold, not the chill of an unheated building. This was something deeper, a cold that seemed to radiate from the air itself. I should have run. I should have burst out of that bathroom and taken my chances with the stairs, with the streets, with anywhere that wasn't here. But my body refused to move. Every muscle was locked, every joint frozen, as if the cold itself had seeped into my bones and turned them to ice. The sleigh bells sounded again, closer now, coming from inside my apartment. The rhythm was wrong. Too slow, too deliberate, each chime separated by seconds of silence. And between the chimes, I heard something breathing. Not the mechanical breathing from the phone call, but something wet and heavy, like lungs filled with fluid struggling to draw air. My laptop screen changed again. The message disappeared, replaced by a single line of text. Behavioral index calculation complete. I stared at those words, waiting for the verdict, waiting to learn what the system had decided about me. The seconds stretched into eternities. The breathing grew closer. The cold deepened until I could see my breath misting in front of my face. Another line of text appeared. Classification, observer, unknown target, compliance noted. I didn't understand. The words meant something, but my terrified mind couldn't process their implications. I wasn't a target? What did that mean for everyone else, for all those families who hadn't been classified as observers? The final message appeared on the screen, each word burning itself into my memory. Warning served. Do not access again. The cold began to recede. The pale light faded from my living room. The breathing sound moved away, back toward whatever opening had been created in my ceiling. I heard the grinding noise again, but in reverse, as if something was closing rather than opening. And then the sleigh bells, distant now, moving across the roof toward the edge of the building before fading into silence. I don't know how long I sat in that bathtub. Minutes or hours, time had lost all meaning. Eventually, the lights in my apartment flickered back on. The hum of the electrical system resumed. The ordinary sounds of the city filtered through my windows, car horns and distant sirens and all the mundane noises of urban life. I climbed out of the bathtub on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. The bathroom was undamaged, exactly as I had left it. I opened the door and stepped into my living room, expecting devastation, expecting to see my ceiling torn open to the sky. Everything was intact. The roof was solid, no sign of damage anywhere. My furniture stood in its usual arrangement. The coffee I had been drinking hours ago sat on my desk, the mug positioned exactly where I had left it. If not for the recording on my phone and the messages on my laptop, I might have convinced myself it was all a nightmare. But I checked the roof the next morning. I climbed the access stairs and walked across that industrial surface with the winter sun cold on my face. And I found it. In the center of the roof, directly above my living room, a perfect circle of ash. The surface had been burned in a ring maybe 10 feet in diameter, the kind of mark that might be left by something descending from above, something that ran hot enough to scorch concrete. I haven't accessed any restricted servers since that night. I deleted the forum bookmarks, reformatted my hard drive, and disconnected from every shadow network I had spent years building access to. The message was clear. I had been allowed to live because I hadn't done anything worth dying for. I was an observer, a witness, someone who stumbled into something I wasn't supposed to see. But I can't forget what I saw. Every Christmas Eve now, when families gather around their computers to track Santa's journey across the globe, I think about the second dot. The gray one that moves faster than anything should be able to move. The one that visits the houses the public tracker skips. And I wonder how many people don't wake up on Christmas morning, erased from existence by something that moves through the darkness while children dream of presents. The naughty list isn't a joke. It never was. And somewhere in the digital infrastructure of our holiday traditions, something is still watching, still calculating, still deciding who gets visited by what. This Christmas Eve, when you track Santa online, watch carefully. If the sleigh icon skips your neighborhood, if it moves past your house without stopping, close the browser, turn off the lights, and pray that the second dot has already moved on. Because if it hasn't, if it's turning back toward your location, 30 seconds is all it takes. And you won't hear the sleigh bells until it's far too late.